Hey, what's up? This is Lynwood Robinson. Welcome to another episode of the Seito podcast. Today, I'm here with my good friend, Mr. Dean Wellins, who is a storyboard artist, a animator, director, musician. He does it all. He's worked on Big Hero 6, one of my other favorite shows, Iron Giant. I just recently found out it's Osmosis Jones too.
I did.
What?
Yeah, I know.
With Chris Rock.
Absolutely.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and I worked on all those things. I've been in animation for many, many, many years. You know, since leaving CalArts in 1992. So a long time ago.
Wow.
Doesn't seem like it's long ago, but it was long. It wasn't very long. Seems like it wasn't very long ago, but I guess it was a very long time ago. But anyway, yeah.
Are you originally from California?
I was actually born in Spain on an Air Force base. So my dad was in the Air Force, but we settled in California. Probably was about 3 or 4, and so I consider myself pretty much from California. Grew up here, pretty much Central Valley, California, and then came down to LA when I was went to school, CalArts, in 1990. So.
What part of Spain were you born?
Right outside, right near Zaragoza, which is this little town called Torrejon. So it's Torrejon Air Force Base outside of Zaragoza. So yeah.
Have you been back to Spain?
Yeah, I've been back there. We have a couple friends there that we visit quite often, or actually have visited us quite often, a lot out here, but have been back there to see them on a couple separate occasions. So yeah, I've been back there. Spain's very much like California. It's you get there, you're like, seems like California. It's such a similar sort of landscape and look to it. Just feels like California, but with giant 2,000 century-old castles on the hills rather than Walmarts.
So how did you get into animation?
I think I've always loved it ever since I was a kid. I mean, it was everybody in there, back in the day was waking up on Saturday mornings to watch Saturday morning cartoons, and I was such a huge fan of like Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck. That was like my go-to cartoon. I love those cartoons, and I think it influenced me a lot. And I love to draw that way. I love to draw. My mom was an artist. My brother's an artist. And I like to draw those characters. And finally, just found that I can actually make a living doing this. So I think that's how it really started. Originally, when I went to college, though, I went to UC Davis, and it wasn't for art. I actually went as a physics major.
Oh, wow.
Because I was very into astronomy and I loved science, and so the part of my brain liked science and things like that. I was actually headed that way, but I found I really had, obviously, a love of art and drawing and animation specifically, and animated movies and filmmaking, and so I thought, and somebody actually at UC Davis, where I was going to school at the time, turned me on to this place called California Institute of the Arts down in LA, and they have this character animation program. I was like, wow, there's actually schools that teach animation. I didn't realize they were out there, and I thought, oh, you know what? I'll just give it a try, and maybe I'll see if I can get in. And so I didn't have a portfolio at the time. I actually had a Tony Lama boot box. You keep the boots come in. That's all I had. And I rolled up all my drawings in there and some other stuff I'd done on computers and some videotapes, and I just bound it up in tape and sent it to CalArts. I think it was my second year at UC Davis, and they sent a letter back and said, you've been accepted to film a video. I was like, oh, cool. And then my next question was, how am I going to pay for that? Because even back then, it wasn't cheap for me. So yeah, but I got in there, and pretty much once I landed at CalArts, I was like, I've definitely found a place that's speaking my language.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So,
were your parents pretty supportive of that change?
My mom's an artist and musician too. So when she's passed away now, but when she was very good artist and amazing organist, pianist, and so she loved that we did art and all that kind of thing, and was very proud of us in that regard. My dad is a oral surgeon, so he was in the dental program, and grew up in a sort of science more thing. So when I was headed that way, I think he thought, that's probably the way I'll go. And so, I had to break it to him that, my physics road was now going to take a detour onto the animation road. But I think in the end he thought, well, it seemed like I had that love, and I don't think it shocked him at all. But but he took a little getting used to. I'm sure now he's proud of me that I made certainly a living at it, and but probably took a little bit more getting used to for him, I would think. Right.
Do you think that the way you did it 20 years ago is different than now? Do you think you can get away with just going, you know what, I'm just going to send it the way you did? Because I love the fact that you just said, you know what, this must be good.
Yeah.
Throw it out there.
You know what, I think I was just super naive as to I think I'd even heard about CalArts maybe like 4 or 5 days before I even sent it. Like, I mean, I didn't even heard of the place until one of my teachers there at UC Davis mentioned it, and I was like, oh. And then when I finally looked it up, the deadline to get in portfolios was I want to say like 1 week later, and I was like, oh man, okay, well if I'm going to do this, and I had a lot of stuff already, but I was like, if I'm going to do this, I need to do it now. And I looked up as much as I could. There wasn't, getting on the internet wasn't a possibility.
Right. That was what year again?
So this is 1990, 1989.
Okay. So yeah,
there was no internet to get onto. So I just had to go by. Luckily, this teacher at UC Davis actually had one of the admission books for CalArts. So I was looking through that, going, I don't know, from the description, it sounds exactly what I want. So I said, well, you know what? I'm just gonna, and it's basically had a rundown of what was required to submit. I said, well, this is as close as I got. I don't know if I actually have a portfolio, but I have a bunch of stuff. And I'd done a bunch of animation on what were Amigas back then, or Amiga computers, which sort of like were actually amazing computers for their time, but they fell by the wayside. But I actually had one. I did a lot of animation on it, so putting those onto videotapes, I think all that helped me. I think today it's very much more structured as to exactly what you bring into that. I mean, I think you have this sort of sketchbook that's really, really intricate of all the different drawings and ideas and things that you sort of sell yourself with on top of portfolio, showing life drawing and all this stuff. I mean, I had little bits of that, but not a whole lot. It was mostly just the animation, but so I think it was much more loosey-goosey back then. I think now it's very much like you need these 5 things or we don't, you know what I mean? And even, it was funny though, because I had no idea it was even hard to get it. I knew nothing about it. I just put it up there, took it down to the FedEx place and said, I need to send this. And the lady went, okay, send it. I was like, okay.
There's brilliance in that.
I had no idea. I didn't even know it was hard to get into. And then later when I actually met my classmates, because in our whole class for character animation that year, I want to say there was like 62 people.
Oh, wow.
That's it. And one of my friends was like, oh yeah, when I got the acceptance letter, I like broke down crying. I was so excited. I was like, I just thought about, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. I didn't think it was that big a deal. I thought, well, I thought in my head, well, if they let me in, it must be easy to get in. But I found out it wasn't easy to get in. They had 1,200 applicants, and there were about 62 of us. So I was like, wow, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. I actually made it in, but the skin of my teeth, probably,
Wow.
So I think looking back, my view of it's much clearer than when I was doing it at the time. I was totally naive.
So that was, so now you spent 4 years thereafter?
I only did 2 years.
2 years.
So I started the class, I started in 1990, and then 1992, I actually got an internship into Turner feature animation. So Ted Turner at the time had his own sort of, TNT, all that. He was sort of the cable guru at the time, and he started his own, wanted to do feature animation, sort of Disney level feature animation, opened up a feature house, which was Turner Feature Animation. And at that point, they brought in a handful of new kids from CalArts to be interns, to learn the craft, and then to move into, animation or clean up animation or whatever it is.
So what did Turner release?
They did, basically, they did 2 movies, which under the Turner Feature Animation, which were The Page Master with Macaulay Culkin, which it's okay, it's okay. But and it's sort of like at the height of when he was really popular, Home Alone sort of thing, right thereafter. And then the other one they did was Cats Don't Dance. But I had left there before. I didn't work on Cats Don't Dance. I just worked on The Page Master, actually.
So after your internship, what did you do after that?
My internship, actually, well, when I was at college at Cal Arts, I had to make a living because I had to feed myself.
Right.
One of the things my dad was not going to do was going to pay for it, because he said if we really want to go after that, then you're going to figure out a way to pay for it, because it was pretty expensive. So I had to basically go to work, and I ended up finding a place up where I live up in northern part of LA there, where I found this house that does this sort of electronic brochure house that I worked at night doing art on the computer for them, and so I basically did a little work for them on the side while I was going to school. Then I got into the internship, did that for a year and then I actually got to work on the page master and cleanup, and I really wanted to get into actually animating on features, and it was just really difficult to find a position to do that. So I actually went back, just I think for like a year or so. I worked back at that same place that I worked while I was at Cal Arts for a while, until I saw another opportunity come up, which was at another commercial house after that, a place called Renegade Animation, that did a lot of, sort of the Bugs Bunny, Michael Jordan commercials, those original commercials that they made all the movies from eventually. They did a bunch of other stuff, so I worked there, and then at that point but it was always an eye that eventually I want to get into being a feature animator, on features, which I finally got the opportunity to do with Brad Bird and On Iron Giant and all that. So that's where I got into that.
So now, explain cleanup for us.
Cleanup. Well, in 2D animation, you have what are animators, your basic animators, which are the people actually drawing all the action on paper, basically, but it's usually very rough drawing, meaning that it's a little sketchy and a little scratchy the way they sort of draw in the characters. I mean, you can read it and you understand it, but in the digital age where we have to actually take and color things digitally, or when we did color things digitally, you would scan in the drawings to then come up into a computer program that somebody could quickly go and fill in all the colors to the different parts of the character. And if it's too sketchy of a line, the computer has a hard time deciding where the boundaries are to then, color it in.
Okay.
So it became necessary to do a cleanup pass. On top of all the rough animation, you'd have a whole department of cleanup artists, from a key cleanup artist who does sort of the basic, who sort of sets the style that the scene will be cleaned up in, or sort of the interpretation, and then people down the road that'll start filling in all the drawings, because it's anywhere from 12 to 24 drawings for every second. So we're doing a lot of drawings, and usually it's a big team that does each character, or set of characters. And so cleanup basically is to do a very, very tight, we use mechanical pencils to do this really tight drawing of the character in movement that eventually could be scanned in the computer digitally and then colored quickly, just for expedite the whole process. But in the end, that's basically how. But I mean, cleanups have been going on for years before us, not just because digital animation or digital cleanup or coloring, but before that, they did ink lines on cells.
Right.
That got replaced by cleanup artists who could just then scan in those things and get them colored in the computer.
So now, if so I know you have kids. If you're thinking on having your children get into the industry, what would your advice be for, like, okay, let's start off with Cal Arts or Otis or some of these other schools?
Yeah.
What would you recommend that they do?
Wow. Well, it's funny. You're speaking to somebody who's in that right now. I have a son who's heading that direction, and sorry. Yeah, my son is heading down that same path, and to me, it's all about, it's like any I think creative endeavor. How do you become a good writer? Is to write a lot. How do you become a good artist? Is to draw a lot, and not just draw for the sake of it, but trying to draw life, trying to be observant of things around you. So I'm always telling him to not just always draw just from his head, like just things I'm just thinking about, I just want to draw, but to really look at life and take inspiration from life to put into your drawings, I think I think that not for just drawing, but writing, music, everything. I think people pull from life to then inject into whatever creative thing they're doing. Drawing particularly is a huge thing, and I think even young kids like me, when I went to Cal Arts, I was like, we had classes 4 hours of sitting and doing life drawing with a model where you sit there and go, 4 hours. Oh my gosh. I had to sit here and draw this person for 4 hours, 2 times a week or 3 times a week or however many times we did it. And it was like, it seemed odious and sort of like, oh my gosh, and how much we got to do this. But you realize your brain is learning the human figure, it's learning reality to then push that reality once you're animating it. You know what I mean? If you don't know, it's, you need to learn the rules before you start breaking the rules and having fun break the rules. So anyway, going back to it, I mean, I really tell my son, you need to start looking at the world like an artist. Not just drawing, but literally when you start to really commit to being an artist, you will sit and start looking at somebody and seeing the way they're sitting and seeing how they're shifting their weight and why they're leaning on this hand and why this one's this way and how their shoulders are turned compared to their hips. And you start to, the world kind of becomes like Neo in the Matrix. You look at it another way, that then you start pulling and making little mental notes. Oh, that was interesting, the way that person's hand sort of, sat on their cheek and pushed it up into their eye. And when I animate, now my character's going to do that. And people are going to go, wow, that's really realistic. They don't know why it's so realistic, but they know because I've observed, now I'm putting it into my art, and now they're getting this sort of relatability when they look at artwork that they're not getting from everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I tell my son certainly that he needs to start looking at the world as an observer, as an artist, and then trying to put that into his artwork. And then when you get into schools like Cal Arts and things like that, that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for the perfectly drawn, refined edge sort of a thing. They want to see observation and then entertainment within that observation and how you're going to take those ideas and make them fun or exciting or surprising and all those things. So not that that's easier said than done, but it's certainly what I tell him. And
now, do you spend much time yourself doing life drawings, or are you just too busy now?
I don't do a lot of it, honestly, as much as I used to. Lately, I've actually we actually, over at Disney, we have life drawing that they do every Tuesday. So I've actually sat in a few of those. We're able to lately just to, sit back and just try to do it again. Because, there ain't nothing that wakes you up as to, where your flaws are, and doing some life drawing, boy, is it difficult, And yeah, it just levels the playing field real fast between people. You think, oh no, I can draw no problem. You sit there and try to draw a figure, like, oh my gosh, man, this is really this is hard. Man, I forgot how hard this is. But anyway, it just helps you recalibrate where you are, and that you're, and that's the other thing. I think for people who want to become artists, and you feel like, oh man, I don't know if I'm good enough to get into Disney. I don't know if I'm good enough to get in like that. Well, get used to that feeling. You will never feel like you're good enough to get to any next level, really. Mm-hmm. You just have to get the confidence within yourself to feel like I can get to that next level, but keep the humility that I still have a lot to learn. I am constantly on the stage of, I know I need to direct people and tell them this is the vision that, we need to go down. But at the same time, I don't know, man, I still have a lot to learn about storytelling, about, visual development, things like that, or how to portray an idea visually. It's just, it's painful. And that pain will never go away. It will always be there. There'll never be a point where you're like, I finally got it figured out. You will never get that feeling. You will never, ever feel like, finally I made it. And I've met people along my career that have gotten to a point where they go, you know what, I'm good now. I'm an animator. I know what I'm doing. I know I can handle any situation. And then you look at their art, you realize you have stopped. You've stopped growing. And you can see it in their art. Mm-hmm. And then you're the one now going over their artwork to make it better because somebody told them along the way, you're great. You don't need to get any better than you are. And
It's
you see it. You watch.
constant effort to climb that ladder, or improve yourself, or see something that.
And just accept the fact that there's no top to that ladder. You're gonna keep climbing, and until you're dead, probably.
I believe the best artists around. When I say artists, it could be Richard Branson or whatever. They're constantly saying, "Okay, let me see what else I can do, and improve and learn." That's
I mean, I always go back to this interview I saw with Michael Jordan, where he said, back in college or high school, I mean, probably high school, I assume that he was like, you never felt like he was getting any better, but everyone else was getting worse around him.
That's good,
you know what I mean? You feel like, these guys aren't very good, but I still feel like I have a lot to do.
Right.
But boy, and it's that way. It's so true. You feel like I'm struggling to try to get this drawing right, trying to convey an idea, and yet you look at other artwork that at one point you thought was pretty good, and you're going, that's actually not very good. Like, it's not. Now you're able to see it for what it is, and you're able to apply all your experience to something and see where it might be lacking. But boy, when you go back to look at your own stuff, it's just as lacking, and it'll never stop, unfortunately.
And you have to have an open mind when you're even self-critiquing yourself. Do I just pass this along? But then there's that other point where you work on it so much that you don't want to show it yet.
Right.
Sometimes you have to take it back to your Davis days and go, throw it out there. Let's see what happens.
You do, yeah. And that is the balance right there, is trying to know when, of course it could always be better, but at this point, for the sake of whatever project I'm working on, or for my own, things I'm trying to do, I need to put something up there and get some feedback. And that too, you can't live in a vacuum.
Right.
I think getting other people's input is just as important, because they can help you go, actually, you're trying to do all this. If you just did this, you get the same thing. You go, oh man, I haven't even thought of that. So other people's input is equally as important. If you kind of get too insular and just sit in your own little vacuum and just try to work too much of it on your own, at a certain point, you're just going to drive yourself to, go crazy. So.